I still remember the day they cut me off. My own parents, after everything I did for them, told me I was no longer welcome in their lives. I was only 18 years old, just a few months after graduation, when my father looked me in the eye and said, "You're on your own now, Jessica. Don't come back." I was devastated, but I had no choice but to leave. I moved into a tiny apartment with barely enough money for rent, worked 2 part-time jobs just to pay the bills, and had to scrape together every cent I could. But that day, that moment, something inside me changed. I swore I would never let them see me fail. My name is Jessica Miller, and I'm 30 years old now. I've worked hard to get where I am today. And now, after all these years, I'm successful, at least I thought I was. They never even checked on me during those years of struggle, never reached out to see if I was okay, if I needed help. Now, they want something from me. They want my money. It started with a call from my mother. "We need to talk, Jess," she said, like nothing had ever happened. I knew what it was about. They wanted to make up for years of absence with one thing: money. I was sitting in my office, staring at the screen of my laptop when the phone rang. It was my mom. I almost didn't pick up. I wasn't sure I wanted to hear from her, but I did. When I answered, she didn't waste any time. "We need you to help us, Jessica. Your father and I are struggling, and we need your support." Struggling? They were asking for money after all these years, after I was the one left to pick up the pieces of my life while they moved on without me. The nerve of them. I was speechless for a moment. Then, all the anger, the years of abandonment, came rushing back. I didn't yell. I didn't scream. I just listened. I didn't have to say much. I could feel the weight of it all. My success meant nothing to them, only the cash they thought they were entitled to. It was almost like they expected me to just hand over everything I had worked for, like I owed them for the years they'd neglected me. But I wasn't the same person I had been at 18. I wasn't the scared little girl anymore. I had a plan. It wasn't about giving them what they wanted. It was about showing them that I had my own boundaries. And this time, I wasn't backing down. I put the phone down and took a deep breath. The next move was mine, not theirs. It's been days since I received that call from my parents, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. I sat at my desk, staring at my computer screen, trying to focus on my work, but all I could hear was my mother's voice, asking for my help. I wanted to ignore it, to forget it, but something inside me told me I couldn't. They'd cut me off at 18, and now, at 30, they wanted to take advantage of what I had worked so hard to build. I thought back to those years when I had nothing. I had lived in a small apartment with peeling paint on the walls, struggling to make ends meet. I had worked every day, sometimes even late into the night, just to make sure I could pay rent. There were times I didn't know where my next meal was coming from, but I never once called them. They were too busy living their own lives, and I wasn't about to bother them. When I first left home, I was scared. I didn't know what I was doing or where I was going, but I knew one thing: I wasn't going to depend on anyone. It was just me, and I had to figure it out. Those years were hard, but they shaped me into the person I am today. I learned to be strong, to push through the pain, and to never give up on myself. I thought of how I had worked my way up in the marketing world, how I had built my career from nothing. I had a nice apartment now, a steady income, and a future that looked brighter than ever. I had succeeded, despite everything they had put me through. So when they called me asking for money, something inside me snapped. How dare they? I didn't owe them anything. They didn't support me when I needed them the most, and now they thought they could just waltz back into my life, expecting me to give them what I had worked so hard for? No. I wasn't going to let them treat me like that again. I could feel the anger rising in my chest, but I forced myself to stay calm. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of seeing me lose control. I had learned a long time ago that the best way to deal with people like them was to be calm, collected, and calculated. The next time they asked for something, I would be ready. I decided to meet them. It was hard, but I knew it was the only way to end this. I couldn't keep running from the past, and I certainly couldn't keep pretending like everything was fine when it wasn't. My parents wanted my help, but they hadn't earned it. As I walked into their house, a familiar heaviness settled in my chest. It was the same house I had grown up in, but it felt different now. The furniture was newer, the walls freshly painted, but it all seemed hollow to me. The people inside, my parents, were no longer the ones who had raised me with love and support. No, now they were just strangers who thought they could come back into my life because I had succeeded. "Jessica, it's so good to see you," my mother said as she opened the door. Her smile seemed genuine, but I could see the nervousness in her eyes. My father stood behind her, his arms crossed, his face unreadable. I forced a smile, but it didn't reach my eyes. I walked in, and the familiar smell of their home hit me. It was strange how much it felt like a memory, something that used to comfort me, but now only reminded me of everything I had lost. We sat down at the table, and they wasted no time. My mother started talking, asking how I had been, what I was doing, and then, just like I knew she would, she steered the conversation to money. "Jessica, we've been going through some tough times," she said. "Your father's health isn't what it used to be, and I just don't know how we'll manage without some help." I could feel the tension in the room rise. It wasn't just about money. It was about everything that had happened between us. They hadn't been there when I needed them, but now here they were, expecting me to take care of them. I looked at them both, trying to steady my breath. My father was quiet, watching me with a coldness in his eyes that I hadn't noticed before. It hit me then. This wasn't just about money. This was about control. They didn't care about me. They only cared about what I could give them. The realization stung. But I wasn't going to give in. Not this time. I had worked too hard to get where I was, and I wasn't going to let them take it all away. I leaned back in my chair, taking a deep breath. "I'm sorry, but I can't help you," I said calmly, looking them both in the eye. The silence in the room was thick. My mother's smile faltered, and my father shifted uncomfortably in his seat. But I didn't flinch. I wasn't going to back down. I had come a long way, and I was done being their pawn. I watched as my parents sat there, stunned by my refusal. My mother's eyes flickered with a mix of surprise and disappointment, while my father remained silent, his gaze colder than I had ever seen it before. I had always been the one to fix things, to take the high road, to make them proud, but now everything was different. I didn't need to prove anything to them anymore. I was done. The years of sacrifices, the constant yearning for their approval, had left me hollow. I had spent so long trying to gain their acceptance, but at what cost? I had given everything and still, they never saw me. They never understood what it meant to struggle, to fight for something. My father finally spoke, his voice low and deliberate. "You don't understand, Jessica. We're not asking for much. Just a little help. A little help." It felt like a slap in the face. They had never been there for me when I needed them the most. They hadn't asked about me when I was barely scraping by, when I didn't know where my next meal was coming from. But now that I had something, they thought they had a right to it. My mother reached across the table, her hand trembling slightly as she touched mine. "We're getting old, Jess. We don't have the time to fix things. Please, just this once, help us." The words were supposed to sound sincere, but all I heard was manipulation. They didn't care about me. They cared about what I could give them. I withdrew my hand and stood up slowly. "I'm sorry, but this is not my responsibility anymore," I said, my voice steady but firm. "I've worked too hard to get here, and I'm not going to let you take that from me." I turned to leave, not waiting for their response. My heart pounded in my chest, but it wasn't fear I felt, it was liberation. I was finally taking control of my life. The door closed behind me with a soft click, and for the first time in years, I felt at peace. I had made my decision, and it was the right one. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need anyone's approval. I was enough on my own. I spent the next few days in a daze, replaying the events over and over in my mind. The conversation with my parents had left me shaken, but it also gave me clarity. I had made the right choice. I didn't need to be their safety net anymore. I had spent so much of my life trying to gain their approval, but it was clear now that they didn't deserve it. I wasn't a charity. I wasn't here to fix their problems. I was done playing that role. But even as I said all of that to myself, there was a part of me that still felt guilty. How could I not help them? They were my parents, after all. The people who had raised me, who had given me life. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that they had never truly given me what I needed. They had always been distant, always too busy with their own lives to be there for me when I needed them most. The moments when I was struggling, when I was barely hanging on, they were nowhere to be found. And now that I had something to offer, they came knocking. I didn't owe them anything. They had made their choices, and I had made mine. My life was my own now, and I wasn't going to let anyone take that away from me. I had learned the hard way that family didn't always mean support, and I wasn't going to let them use me anymore. The guilt started to fade as I focused on my own future. I had built my success from the ground up, and no one, least of all them, was going to tear it down. It was time for me to take control. As the days passed, I started to feel stronger. I wasn't going to let their manipulation affect me anymore. I had learned to stand up for myself, to make the decisions that were best for me, not them. I knew that my path wasn't going to be easy, but I was ready. I was ready to live my life for me, not for anyone else. I had been trying to move on, trying to focus on the next chapter of my life. But then, one day, I received an unexpected message. It was from my mother. I hadn't heard from her since the last time we spoke, when I had turned them down. My heart skipped a beat, but I hesitated before opening it. The message was short, but it made me feel uneasy. "We need to talk, Jessica. It's important." I stared at the screen for a long moment, my mind racing. I thought I had made it clear that I was done with their manipulation, but this message felt different. They were trying again, trying to pull me back in. I could feel the pressure building in my chest. I didn't want to meet them again, didn't want to hear more of the same old excuses. But something about it made me second-guess myself. Maybe it was just a part of me that still wanted to believe things could be different, that maybe, just maybe, they had changed. But deep down, I knew it wasn't about change. It was about control. They wanted me to feel guilty for standing my ground, for choosing to live my life on my terms. I could almost hear their voices in my head, the same ones that always tried to guilt me into doing what they wanted. I couldn't let them do that again. I couldn't let them back into my life, pretending everything was fine, pretending that they cared. I had worked too hard to get where I was. I had earned my independence, my freedom, and I wasn't going to let anyone take that away from me. It was time to take the final step. I picked up my phone and typed a reply. "I have nothing more to say to you. Please stop contacting me." I hit send without hesitation, feeling a strange sense of peace wash over me. For the first time in my life, I was finally free. Free from the guilt, the expectations, and the toxic need for approval that had held me back for so long. I didn't need them. I never did. I had made it on my own, and that was enough. As I set my phone down, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I knew that this was the right decision. I had nothing left to prove. I was going to live my life the way I wanted. No more looking back, no more waiting for them to come around. I thought I would feel relieved after cutting them off. But the days that followed were harder than I had anticipated. The emptiness I had carried for so long seemed to amplify in the silence of my apartment. No more calls, no more messages, and yet, somehow, their absence made me feel even more alone. It was ironic, really. I had spent years chasing after their approval, believing that if I just worked hard enough, they would see me, truly see me. But now, when I had finally broken free from their hold, I was left with the weight of all the years I had spent longing for their acceptance. The truth settled in slowly, piece by piece. I had spent so much time and energy on a relationship that was never really a two-way street. It was always about them, their expectations, and their needs. Never about me. I had been conditioned to believe that I owed them something, that I had to constantly prove myself. But now I saw it clearly. I had been giving while they had been taking. They had never once given back what I needed. No, this wasn't just about money. This was about respect, love, and all the things I had been denied for so long. It was about acknowledging that I had a right to my own life, my own choices, and my own boundaries. And once I realized that, it was like a switch flipped. I wasn't going to be the same person anymore. I wasn't going to let their absence or their guilt trips pull me back into their toxic orbit. I didn't need them to validate me. I had already done it on my own. The more I reflected on everything, the more I felt at peace. The guilt that had once plagued me, the anxiety that had been a constant companion, started to fade. I was finally free. free to live my life on my own terms, without worrying about what they thought or what they wanted. And in that freedom, I found a sense of strength I hadn't known I had. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. I had finally taken control of my own story, and that was something no one could ever take away from me. I woke up the next morning with a sense of clarity I hadn't had in a long time. The weight from the past few weeks, actually, from the past few years, felt a little lighter. It was like I had taken back a part of myself I had long forgotten existed. The phone calls, the guilt, the endless demands, they no longer had the same grip on me. I was in control now, and it felt liberating. But there were moments, fleeting moments, when doubt would creep in. What if I made the wrong decision? What if cutting ties with them forever was a mistake? But each time the doubt surfaced, I would remind myself of the pain, the years of being overlooked, the endless attempts to prove my worth, only to be met with silence or indifference. No, I wasn't making a mistake. I was choosing myself. It wasn't just about my parents anymore. It was about me, about learning to put myself first, to not feel obligated to fix every broken thing around me. The world outside my apartment seemed brighter. I had started focusing more on my work, even starting to entertain ideas for future projects that I'd been too distracted to think about before. I hadn't realized how much of my energy had been tied up in thoughts of them, in worrying about their approval. Now, I felt free to explore what I truly wanted, what made me happy. The pressure was gone. No more pretending to be someone I wasn't just to fit into their narrative. For the first time in years, I felt like I could finally breathe. I wasn't trying to meet anyone's expectations but my own. The best part was that, despite all the doubts and fears that had clouded my mind for so long, I had come out stronger. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was thriving. And I knew deep down that this was just the beginning. I was no longer the girl who had to prove herself to anyone. I had found my own voice, and it was time to make my own path. I wasn't going to let anyone steal that from me again. I was sitting at my desk when the phone rang. I almost didn't want to pick up. It was a number I didn't recognize, but something told me I should. As I answered, I immediately recognized my mother's voice on the other end. My heart skipped a beat. I hadn't heard from her since the last time we spoke. "Jessica, it's been a while. We've been thinking about you," she said, her tone softer than I remembered. "We need to talk." A cold wave of tension washed over me. I didn't want to pick up where we left off. My mind instantly went back to everything they had put me through. But the familiar pull of guilt made me hesitate. I wanted to say no, to ignore the call, to protect myself from the same manipulation they always used. But I couldn't. The thought of closing that chapter forever, of severing the last thread that connected us, was terrifying. I had been avoiding this moment for so long, but it was here now. I took a deep breath, my hand gripping the phone tightly as I steadied myself. "What is it?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. She hesitated before speaking. "We just need some help, Jessica. Things aren't going well. We're struggling. We thought maybe you could help us, like you used to." The words hit me like a punch to the stomach. The same request, the same plea, the same pattern. They wanted my money again. I could feel the anger bubbling up inside me, but I fought it back. I wasn't going to fall into the same trap. Not this time. I had worked too hard to get where I was, to let them pull me back into their world of guilt and manipulation. "I can't do that," I said, my voice steady. Now, stronger than before. "I've told you before. I'm not responsible for fixing everything. You've made your choices, and I've made mine." There was silence on the other end. I could hear her trying to form words, but I had already made my decision. I wasn't going to let them use me anymore. I had given everything I had for years, and now it was time for me to take care of myself. "Goodbye, Mom," I said quietly, hanging up before she could say anything else. I felt an odd sense of peace settle over me. For the first time in years, I had taken control of my own life. I had made the hard choice. It wasn't easy, but it was the right one. The guilt, the doubt, all of it faded away in that moment. I had finally freed myself from their expectations. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was thriving. I didn't hear from them for weeks after that. Part of me thought I'd finally put everything behind me, but the truth was, their absence left a strange void. I was used to the chaos they brought into my life. Even though I didn't want them back, Their silence felt like a reminder of the years I had spent chasing their approval. I knew I couldn't go back to the way things were, but part of me still hoped, in some small corner of my mind, that they might come to realize what they had done. Then, one morning, a letter arrived. It was from my mother. The handwriting was familiar, but it looked strange to me now. I took a deep breath before I opened it. Inside, there was a short note. Jessica, I know we haven't spoken in a while, but I need you to know something. I've been thinking about everything we've been through. I may not have been the parent you needed, but I never stopped loving you. Please, consider this a plea for us to find a way to make amends. I'm sorry for everything. I stared at the words for a long time. My first instinct was to throw it away, to ignore it like I had done for years. But something in me hesitated. I couldn't deny that a part of me longed for reconciliation, even if it was just a small part. I thought back to the child I once was, the one who had only wanted her parents' love. But I also thought of the woman I had become, the one who had fought for everything she had, and how I had finally found the strength to stand up for myself. I realized that my decision wasn't just about them. It was about me too. I had spent so long putting them first that I had lost sight of my own needs. I had spent so long worrying about their acceptance that I forgot I had to accept myself first. I wasn't angry anymore, not like I had been before. But I wasn't going to let them back in, not without acknowledging the damage they had done. They couldn't just come back into my life and expect everything to be okay. That would be the same mistake I had made over and over again. I put the letter down and took a deep breath. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I could finally move forward. I didn't need their forgiveness, and I didn't need to forgive them right away. I just needed to continue building my life on my own terms, and that was enough. I sat there, staring at the letter, my thoughts racing. There was a part of me that still wanted to believe in the possibility of change, that maybe, just maybe, my parents had truly learned from their mistakes. But I knew better now. I couldn't go back to who I was, to that girl who had desperately sought their approval at any cost. I had grown too much, had worked too hard, to let their words pull me back into the same cycle of guilt and manipulation. I folded the letter slowly, as if the weight of it might crush me if I moved too quickly. I wasn't angry anymore, but the wound was still there, deep down. It had been there for years, buried under the layers of dreams and hopes that I had tried to build around it. I put the letter aside and went on with my day, but something was different. The letter, their words, had touched a part of me that I hadn't even realized was still aching. I spent the evening reflecting on everything, the years I spent trying to be the daughter they wanted, the years I spent chasing after their love. But now, I was chasing something else. I was chasing peace, freedom, and most of all, the truth. The truth was, I had been the one holding myself back. They had taken away their love long ago, but I had given it up too, in the hopes that they would see me, that they would finally appreciate me for who I was. But I couldn't wait for them anymore. I had to appreciate myself. That was the lesson I had learned through all of this. My parents didn't define who I was. I defined who I was. And I had spent too many years hiding from that truth. The next morning, I woke up with a new clarity. The weight of the past no longer hung over me like a shadow. I wasn't carrying it anymore. I had let it go. It was time to move forward, to finally stop living in their reflection and start living for myself. I wasn't going to let their past actions dictate my future. I had a life to build, and I was going to build it on my own terms. I didn't need their approval, their apology, or their love to make me feel worthy. I already was. And that realization, that simple but powerful truth, was the most freeing thing I had ever felt. I woke up the next day feeling a sense of lightness I hadn't felt in years. The weight of my past, of the years spent fighting for validation from people who could never give it to me, was finally gone. It was almost like a rebirth. I wasn't just free of them. I was free of the expectations I had placed on myself. I wasn't the same person I was a year ago or even 6 months ago. I had learned to stop looking outside myself for answers and started finding them within. I had spent too much of my life thinking that if I just worked hard enough, did enough, sacrificed enough, they would finally see me. But now, I realized that I didn't need their approval. I didn't need to keep chasing their love. I had spent years building a life based on what I thought would earn their affection, but I had never stopped to ask myself what I wanted. What was it that I truly needed? The answer came easily. I wanted peace. I wanted to stop feeling like I owed anyone something. I had given so much, and it was time to give back to myself. The next few weeks were filled with a new energy. I threw myself into my work, into things that brought me joy without guilt. I reconnected with old friends I had neglected, and I began to see the world through a different lens. No longer was I the girl looking over her shoulder, hoping for approval. I was the woman standing tall, embracing every moment of her life. My relationships with others flourished because I was finally giving them the best version of myself, someone who wasn't weighed down by the past, someone who was strong enough to say no when it was necessary. I wasn't afraid to set boundaries anymore. And when I thought about my parents, I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel resentment. I just felt nothing. I had forgiven them long ago, but I realized that forgiveness wasn't about letting them back into my life. It was about letting go of the emotional ties that had kept me bound to them for so long. I had taken control, and that was all I ever needed to do. As I sat back in my chair, looking out the window at the sun setting on a new chapter, I finally understood. I didn't need them. I didn't need anyone to define my worth. I was enough, just as I was. And that was more than enough.